Hey you. Welcome to episode 1 of season 2 of the Free Your Voice podcast. I'm your host, Amber Andrews, and today, y'all, I'm a bit excited because we're doing something totally different. For those that don't know and for those that are new to the podcast, I started my podcast September of 2021, I think September 5th to be exact. Here we are in the new year. It is January 12th, 2022. And I deeply feel in my soul that God was telling me to take my podcast in a different direction. He wanted me to expand it. Let me rewind. Back in December of last year, I strongly felt God telling me that He wanted to do more with my podcast. In the time, I didn't know exactly what He meant. So I just prayed about it. I continued to pray about it. And as we got into the new year of 2022, I remember telling God, God, I think this is the direction you want me to go, but I really wasn't 100% sure. For those that don't know, I have had this YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, as told by Amber. I've had the YouTube channel for 7 years, a little bit more than 7 years, actually. I started it when I was in high school. And my YouTube channel has taken many different directions. I have many different videos on different topics, everything from vlogs, daily vlogging, to fitness videos, to work and lifestyle videos, to meal prepping videos, to just a bunch of stuff, hair, lock videos, all types of things. My channel has taken so many different directions, and I always felt deep down in my soul that God wanted to use my YouTube platform for a much bigger reason. I just never was too sure what it was. So from a bit of praying and constantly asking God for confirmation and discernment, I feel deep in my soul that He wants me to start recording my podcast so that YouTube can also have that media on there too. So in this new year, starting with season 2 of the Free Your Voice podcast, we are going to have the YouTube videos to go along with the podcast vocal. So we will be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and then we'll be on YouTube as well if you want to watch while also listening. So let me go into a brief description before I get started. For those that are watching on YouTube, I just have my setup here. It's a whole bunch of equipment in front of me, y'all, and that's the crazy part. Before hearing from God about starting to put the podcast on YouTube, I really thought to myself, I already have all the equipment because I've done YouTube in the past. So it really wasn't much for me to record the podcast. It was just a decision if that's what God wanted me to do. So I got my ring light, I got my laptop, I got my microphone. I got my microphone for actual podcasting. I have my backdrop. This is a whole setup. You can't even see everything, but I have the whole entire stands with the poles and the little connectors and a backdrop. I've had all these tools and resources at my fingertips, and I have not been using them. So when God told me to go ahead, do the podcast on YouTube, that's the next step I want you to do, I was like, bet, I already got everything I need. So it's a whole setup going on. I might put a little clip at the end so you guys can just see the whole entire setup. But for those that are watching on YouTube, I may be looking at different places, and that's because I have my laptop in front of me and my iPad over here with my notes. So I may not always be looking at the camera from time to time, and then also I have these headphones just so that I can hear playback. So I just wanted to explain that to the people that's watching online. But we're gonna get right into it. Episode 1, season 2. This first episode is going to be called, I'm sure you already saw the title. However, I'm going to say it again. The title is When God Says Move, You Move. God's doing a new thing in 2022. I already said that, but I'm putting emphasis on it because I really feel in my heart that God is going to be doing a new thing for many of us in this new year. It's a new year, why not? But no, I just seriously feel God taking people to other different levels in this year, different seasons in this year, and it's going to be some tribulation, but it's also going to be a lot of revelation that comes with that. So I feel excited. I don't know about you. I think we all should start feeling excited about this new year. Prepare yourself for surprises, because that's what feel like God has in store. So let's get right into it. Like I said, I've had my YouTube channel for 7 years, and I never really knew what direction it was God wanted me to take. I've always tried to speak of God and speak of all that he's done in my life on all of my social media platforms. So Instagram, Facebook, I have my podcast, and now YouTube. And in previous videos, you've heard me touch a little bit here and there on God, but I've never had a actual direction on what God wanted me to do and what he wanted me to say. But like I said, I feel like he's using this podcast for a bigger reason than myself. And that is also what led me to start the podcast back in September. If you are new, please go back and listen to season 1, episode 1 through 10, just to get a background on why I started this podcast and how we got to where we are today. And then the main reason why I'm naming this episode God's Doing a New Thing is because I'm one of those people where I already feel like this season of my life that I'm currently in, with everything that I have going on, I felt like I can't add another thing to my plate. That to add one more thing to my plate, one more thing to do to my plate would just be absurd. I can't do it. I don't have the time. I don't have the resources. I just really couldn't see how I was going to fit something else in to my busy schedule. And so I was praying to God, like, God, what is it? What is it that you're expecting of me out of this new year? I've done the podcast. I've put videos and testimonies on YouTube before. I'm back in school. You told me to go back to school. I'm back in school. I'm working. Like, what is it that you want me to do? And how am I possibly going to have the time for it? So when he finally gave me discernment and told me, like, hey, I want you to start putting your podcast on YouTube, I thought about it and I was like, how? Like, how am I going to have the time, God? I barely have the time and the energy to sit down and actually record my vocal for the podcast. How am I going to add a video in there? And that's one thing where I want to point out to you guys, when God tells you to move, you have to move. And it may not be the same way that he told me, as in actually physically doing something, but he can give you an idea or a thought, and the quicker you move on it, the better. But like many of us, some of us like to drag our feet. Some of us are apprehensive. Some of us aren't sure that we're hearing God in the moment, and therefore we might not do it. But one thing I'm really learning as I deepen my relationship with God is that when you hear him speaking to you, it's okay to ask for confirmation, or it's okay to ask for discernment. But as you're doing that, you should also be looking to see how you can move in the direction that he's telling you to go. So although I wasn't 100% sure that he was telling me that he wanted me to put the podcast on YouTube, I still began to prepare myself just in case. I started to look up ideas as for promoting and branding. I started to make sure that I had all of my equipment still, that I knew where it was within my household so that I can just grab it and get it together. I started to make sure that I had enough space on my phone in case I do have to record videos. There were a lot of things that I just started checking off day by day to make sure, just in case, when God sends me this confirmation, that I'm ready to move and get things done like he said. So it's definitely hard sometimes to move when he says move and be obedient to the calling on your life that he has for you, because if you really think about it, none of us asked for the calling that God has given us. We may have ideas of what direction our life is going to go, or we may have plans of our own, but when God gives you a plan, or when God tells you to do something, that's something that you cannot bargain with. That's something that you cannot put off. That's something that you should not be overlooking. And I think that's hard for a lot of us, because some of us, like I said, we have our own plans, we have our own things going on. For me personally, I literally work 5 days a week, 3 o'clock to 11:30 at night. And I went to work today. It's currently 1:07 in the morning. I got off from work at 11:30, got home by midnight, and I started setting up all my equipment to get ready for the podcast, because I know that I record my podcast every Tuesday night, and the podcast goes up Wednesday. So right after I get done recording this, I'm going to edit everything and get it prepared to upload. So that way, by time Wednesday morning hits, so 7 a.m., 9 a.m., people can have the content to listen to. But I didn't have to do that. I could have easily said, God, you know what? I'm tired tonight. I'm not going to record the podcast. Or God, you know what? I really don't have space in my schedule to physically record for YouTube and record for the podcast. Or you know what, God, maybe I'll do it next week. I could have made a bunch of excuses. However, one thing I'm really trying to focus on in this new year, in this new season of my life, is hearing from God and then acting on it. I do not want to delay any of the promises that He tells me about. I do not want to overstep, or I do not want to hinder any processes that He's working on. So although I couldn't see how this was going to work at first, as time went on, as I continued to pray, as I continued to seek Him, seek His word, seek His face, He showed me step by step what it is that He needed me to do and how it was going to work out. And that's the crazy part. Every time God gives me an idea, even when He first gave me the idea of this podcast, I kept thinking to myself, like, God, I don't know how to record a podcast. God, I can't record a podcast. I don't know how to do it. What do I even do? What type of microphone do I need? What type of tools do I need? Like, I was making all these excuses of why I couldn't do it. But as Christians and as children of God, rather us be obedient and rely on Him for the strength to help us get through what He's asking us to do. You don't always have to agree with what God is telling you, but what you should do is ask Him how. God, how's this going to work? How is it that you want me to go about this? God, give me the steps. God, give me the strength. God, give me the wisdom. So that's one thing I really had to learn. I'm not going to say the hard way, but it took me a minute to really understand that and learn that no matter how impossible something may seem, if you have God and you put Him first in the plan, He will always make a way for you. So even with this podcast, in the beginning, it seemed like something that was so impossible to do, something that I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what software I needed. I didn't know what apps to download. I didn't know how to edit the podcast. I didn't even know how to freaking set up my microphone. But because God told me, hey, I need you to do this. I need you to do this podcast. I just trusted in Him and I took it step by step. And believe it or not, it was actually very easy. The podcast is easy, piece of cake. Like downloading the software, recording, setting everything up. After I did it the first time, I realized how easy it was. And that's also something I'm realizing every time God gives me a task to do. My first thought is, oh, I don't want to do that because I don't know how, or, oh, I don't want to do that because it's going to be challenging. It's going to be hard. But it's not. It's really not. That's my mind telling me it's going to be hard. But when I sit down to physically do the task that God has asked me to do, nothing about it is hard. In fact, it comes easy. And that's something I'm using to guide my actions and my thoughts with everything, even in everyday life. It's like, if this is what God told me to do, it should not be hard. And I'm not saying that everything in life is going to come easy. I'm just simply saying God is not going to bring you to a place or ask you to go to a place and then leave you there to fail. He's going to give you step by step. He's going to give you little tips here and there on how to do it. He's going to speak to you and you should be able to hear Him so that you can figure this thing out. You're not alone. So the podcast literally took off. 10 episodes and I started in September. And I do an episode every other week. And like I said, I thought it was going to be hard, but it was extremely easy. Even to upload it was extremely easy. So I knew that I was doing what it is God had asked me to do because things were just flowing. To make my logo, that was easy. My logo for the podcast, that was easy. Just everything, branding, making, what's it called? Making little posts for like my Instagram page and making posts for my stories to share and promote it and put it out there. All of that has come very easy as well. And these are all things that I once didn't know how to do, or I once wasn't willing to learn how to do because I thought it would be hard. I thought it would be too much to add to my plate. So here we are, January 12th. 2022, and we're taking the podcast to a whole new level. And when I say where, I refer to the podcast a lot as we and where we are, but it's really just me and God. There's no one else. I don't have a team of people. I don't have any co-hosts. It's just me and God. Okay. So that's why I say we, but yeah, we're taking the podcast to a whole new level. God has decided to do a new thing with the podcast. And like I said, I'm very excited. This episode here was just to give you a brief idea for those that are new listeners. It was to just just introduce you to the podcast, but it was also to introduce everyone, old listeners, new listeners, on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on SoundCloud, all of y'all. It was just to tell you guys the exciting news that we are doing new things. We're going to new levels. God, anytime he gives me an idea, I think like hear about it. Like my thoughts be way down here, but God always blows my mind and he takes it so many steps higher. So it's just crazy to me to think that I'm even recording this for YouTube right now, or that I even was able to get this whole setup going. And I know from here, those that's watching from here don't look like much, but when I say this whole half side of my room done turned into a little YouTube studio type setup, it has. And it's just mind blowing because I'm like, wow, like I'm really doing it. Like I'm really doing what God has called me to do, and he is working it out for me. He's working it out in my favor. So I'm not going to keep rambling. I'm pretty much done with this episode, and I hope you guys continue to tune in every other Wednesday to hear what we have going on next, because guys, I was planning out some episodes on my iPad today when I was at work, and I already done you just have to wait and see, but I already done listed out like the next 3 episodes of what we're going to talk about, and we're going to get into some interesting things. But I'm gonna wrap this one up here. I'm gonna leave all my information in the show notes, in the description box, so you guys can follow us on Instagram, and I'm also going to leave information for those that are listening so that you can get to the YouTube video on YouTube. But I thank you all for listening, for watching, however you choose, and I hope you check in for the next one. Peace. All right, y'all. So this is the setup. We have the microphone right here, ring light, laptop. This is GarageBand. So this is what I use to actually record the voice recording for the podcast. The tripod is back here. This is what you guys were sitting on. My phone. When I say you guys, I mean my phone, because that's what I'm recording with. And then I have the iPad with my notes. And then, like I was saying earlier, behind me is the backdrop. Let me turn the camera around so you guys can see that. So this is the backdrop. These are my plants. Say hello. Or you can ignore them. It's your choice. Okay, let me stop being silly. But yeah, the backdrop is like a whole ordeal. Like it has these long poles on each side, and then a pole that goes all the way across the top that's actually holding the backdrop. And then down on the ground is like the little stand itself. So yeah, I did not come to play. And once again, this is all items that I've had from previous YouTube videos, but I just haven't used in a long time. But like I said, I've had all the resources, all the tools, so it's very easy to set up and get going. But it came in handy because it literally made the perfect backdrop. And this is literally just a black sheet. Like you gotta make it do what you got, okay? But yeah, I just wanted to show you guys the setup, and yeah.